Okay, we're continuing on with the clue in the crumbling wall. This is chapter 12. It is titled The Trap Door. For hours, Nancy had refused to acknowledge that there was no means of escape from the tower. She had pried at the door lock with a nail file from her bag. She had tried to break the wooden panels by sheer force, but their strength had defied her. Now she wandered aimlessly about the circular room. She had been without food and water for so many hours, she began to feel faint. Twice she seriously considered swinging herself over the parapet and making the long drop to the ground, but gave up the idea as foolhardy. I'd be certain to break some bones if I did that, she reasoned. As time dragged on, Nancy grew more and more desperate. She wondered what had become of George. The poor girl. And Bess, what of her? With a feeling of utter dismay, Nancy realized that she had the car keys with her. She certainly had gotten herself and her friends into a dreadful muddle. Nancy sank down on the bottom step of the winding iron staircase to try to figure things out. She stared straight ahead of her. This is the worst trap I've ever been in, she decided unhappily. Suddenly, the distraught girl became aware of something on the floor in front of her. A tiny crack neatly outlined a rectangular space about 3 feet square. Speaking of traps, Nancy muttered, maybe this is a trap door, a chance to escape. Quickly dropping to her hands and knees, she inspected the crack. Obviously, it marked the outline of an opening, but there was no ring or handle with which to pull up the trapdoor. Nancy pried it at first with her fingers and then with her nail file. The slender bit of steel snapped in her hands. Oh, how can I get it open? She fumed, looking around for something heavier with which to lift it. Not a single object was in the tower. After an hour, Nancy discarded the possibility of this means of escape. The room grew stuffy to her, or was it because she felt almost ill from lack of nourishment? Her tongue parched and her head aching, she slowly climbed the stairs and went on the parapet to get some fresh air. The sky became overcast. In a short time it was almost dark. Except for the occasional hoot of an owl and the intermittent croaking of frogs, there was not a sound. Then suddenly Nancy became aware of approaching footsteps. Her first impulse was to shout to make her whereabouts known, as she thought someone had come to rescue her. But intuition warned her to remain silent. Springing to her feet, she looked over the parapet. A man she was sure was a stranger to her was unlocking the door far below her. He snapped on a flashlight and entered the tower. Nancy's heart pounded. Should she walk boldly down the stairs and try to bluff her way out? No, I mustn't do that, she decided. If something sinister is going on at Heath Castle, this man probably is involved. She concluded that should he find her, all her chances to help Mrs. Fenimore and Joan would be ruined. Maybe I can get out of here while the man is busy, the girl thought hopefully. He may have opened the trap door and gone down below. Nancy tiptoed across the little balcony room. Fortunately, she did not reach the doorway, for at that instant a light flashed through the opening. It missed revealing her presence by a fraction of an inch. As Nancy shrank into the shadows, the man began to ascend the iron staircase. With sinking heart, the trapped girl stepped back of the door and pressed herself against the wall. I guess she's like this. The intruder went directly to the parapet. As Nancy peeked out, he began to move his light slowly up and down as if he were signaling. In the backward reflection of the rays which dimly revealed his face, Nancy knew that she had never seen this cruel-looking person before. Though she longed to watch what he was doing, she dared not tarry. This was her opportunity to escape. Tiptoeing around the door, she started down the stairway. On the third step from the bottom, she stumbled. To her oversensitive ears, the noise was loud and grating. Had the stranger heard her? Quick as lightning, she darted down the rest of the steps and reached the courtyard garden in safety. Hurrying to the arched doorway, the girl was relieved to find it was still unlocked. She groped her way along the dark corridor in the castle. A moment later, her knee bumped into a piece of furniture, striking it so hard that she nearly cried out in pain. Another precious 10 minutes was lost as she carefully felt along the dark walls for a door to the grounds. At last her efforts were rewarded. With a deep sigh of relief, she rushed into the open. What an adventure, Nancy shuddered. Now if only I could find George and Bess. By no means were the girl's troubles at an end. She hoped that in the dusky light she would be able to find her way out. She knew that the direction toward the main gate, but with weed-grown paths, treacherous rocks, and roaming dogs, she would have to be very cautious. It was fully an hour before Nancy saw the vague outline of a wall ahead of her. I hope it's the one near my car, she said to herself. Oh, something was moving through the bushes. In an instant, the stillness was broken by the sharp barking of dogs. Can I trust them? Nancy wondered. They may not be friendly after dark. She made a leap for the crumbling wall and scrambled up, reaching the top just as the two hounds arrived. The Drew girl dropped breathlessly to the other side and got her bearings. The car must be up there a short way, she concluded, starting off. 5 minutes later, she came to the automobile. To her amazement and delight, George was huddled in a raincoat on the back seat. She was half asleep. George! The girl sat bolt upright and gave a little scream. It's Nancy! Oh, you scared me out of my wits! Sorry, where's Bess? Gone to get your father. Oh, Nancy, what in the world happened to you? Plenty, but first, tell me, how long ago did Bess leave? Would it be best for us to wait? She went hours ago, but it's a long walk to a bus or a phone. Somebody ought to be here any minute, though, it seems to me. The two girls exchanged stories. George told how she and Bess had become almost frantic over Nancy's disappearance. Fearing she might be in Hector Keep's clutches, Bess had offered to summon Mr. Drew. After Bess left, I heard a noise in the grounds, George related, so I hid in the bushes near the gate. Mr. Keep drove out. While he was locking the gate, I peeked in his car to see if you were there. I really expected you to be lying on the floor, bound hand and foot. I was a prisoner, all right, but not tied up, Nancy smiled. She could smile now. Then what happened? Mr. Keep went straight to your car. He must have seen it when he came to. Nancy groaned. And I thought I had hidden it well. Now all he has to do is look up the license number and he'll know who was here. It's a shame, said George, and it's too bad about my clothes. I didn't tell you what happened with them. I know. While I was looking up the tower, a boy took them away in a rowboat. Who was he, do you know? I never saw him before. He was about 12 years old. But I'd like to wring his neck, the little thief. My best shirt. Why, Nancy, that shirt came from the Bon-Ton. Why, Nancy, that shirt came from the Bon-Ton, and I paid a mint of money for it. If we find Floriana and the Heath money is turned over to her, maybe she'll buy you a new one, teased Nancy. Then suddenly, making a discovery, she added, Say, there isn't any food left. No, Bess and I ate every scrap of the lunch. Nancy, that man in the tower, where do you suppose he came from? No car drove in here. He must have come up the river, the Drew girl replied. Unless he lives on the place, she added as an afterthought. A moving path of light suddenly cut the darkness. An automobile. Was Carson Drew driving it, or was Hector Keep returning? With bated breath, the two girls waited, wondering if they should hide or stand their ground. George, weary of the whole thing, favored the latter, but Nancy felt this move unwise, so together they scrambled out of sight. The car stopped. Bess Marvin alighted. Why, George is gone, she wailed. No, she isn't, her cousin spoke up, walking forward. We were just being careful. We? Nancy is here. Nancy herself was running to the side of the car from which her father had stepped. In an instant she was in his arms. Why, Dad, you're trembling, she said. Nancy, I'm so glad to see you. You gave me such a fright. I'm dreadfully sorry I made such a mess of things, his daughter apologized, but maybe you'll forgive me when I tell you what happened. Tell me about it on the way home. Bess can drive your car as fast as her house. Bess can drive your car as far as her house. Then you take it the rest of the way. On the return to the River Heights, Mr. Drew listened without comment until Nancy had concluded. Her closing sentence made him wrinkle his forehead. I'm convinced, said Nancy, that something sinister is going on at Heath Castle and in the gardens. The walls there aren't crumbling from age, Dad. They're being tampered with for some purpose. I agree it looks mighty suspicious, said Mr. Drew, and Hector Keep may be involved, but suppose you put the whole case out of your mind for a while, at least until you've had a square meal. Upon reaching the Drew residence, Nancy made a beeline for the refrigerator. Hannah Gruen, who had been nearly beside herself with worry, could not understand Nancy's attitude, but upon hearing that nothing worse than hunger was the matter with the girl, the housekeeper smiled. I guess that's youth for you, she murmured. Then aloud she added, You poor child, I'll fix you a warm supper right away. The woman hastened to prepare a meal. Too hungry to wait for the food to cook, Nancy helped herself to a glass of milk and a few cookies. As she ate and drank, she related the highlights from her adventure to the housekeeper. Oh, Nancy, Mrs. Gruen sighed, your love of mystery will yet prove your undoing. You must be more careful. I'm not sure that you should return to Heath Castle, said Mr. Drew, coming into the kitchen. Nancy nearly spilled her glass of milk. Oh, Dad! Why not forget the whole affair for a few days? But time is so short. As it happens, I'm going away on a little trip, Nancy. I thought you might enjoy coming along. Oh, Dad, you know I would at any other time. I plan to go by car and must interview several persons along the way regarding a legal case. Where's the place? Nancy inquired, still without much interest. Hampton. Nancy shook her head. If you'll excuse me, Dad, I believe I'd rather stay here and try to solve the mystery about Floriana. I'm sorry, Mr. Drew said, his eyes twinkling. I thought Hampton might prove of interest to you, especially since it was the town where Floriana Johnson last was seen. Nancy could scarcely believe her ears. Say that again, Dad, she cried. I was talking with Dr. Gibson in Henryville today, Mr. Drew revealed. He looked after Floriana, you know. In fact, he advised her to take that trip from which she never returned. Tell me more. There's not much to tell. Floriana was thin and run down, so the doctor advised her to take a vacation. He suggested she slip off to a quiet place without telling anyone where she was going. Did the doctor know where she went? No, but her sister Vera Fenimore told him she had seen a railroad ticket in Floriana's purse. The destination was Hampton. Oh, Dad, I give in, Nancy stated, trying not to appear too excited. I'll go with you. I rather thought you would, laughed Mr. Drew. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. Better pack your suitcase tonight. He's a good dad.